Coming up on episode 125 of the Behind the Back podcast March Madness review. I think we did pretty solid on our bracket. But you guys stay tuned and we'll take a look at our bracket, where we kind of struck gold and where we really fell apart in this thing. But so far, electric March Madness. So we break that down, plus make our picks for the Sweet 16. And then we talk about the Sacramento Kings, do the draft lottery sim from our new spot in fourth. See who we end up picking in this round, where we land. Will we get the first overall pick in this time for the first time in this episode? We'll see. Stay tuned for that. And then we talk about some NFL. We talk about the Niners transactions, Eagles transactions. What does these moves mean for the Eagles and the Niners? What is their window that they're trying to go for? Is this a shot for the Super Bowl for both of these teams? Or are we really just trying to hold on to something that's already over? So stay tuned. We break down all the news. With that being said, y'all, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben the Jet. Reds. Ben, how are you, brother? How you doing today?
You know, the day is almost here. I get my wisdom teeth pulled out on Friday. So I'm not nervous per se, but I'm not excited about the recovery period. Mm-hmm. So I'm hanging in there. But there's been some solid sports on TV and more to look forward to, so I'm happy about that.
Yes, it's a big sports day. Baseball just started today, so the MLB season just kicked off. So it's another sport that we get to, pretend that we actually watch. But I mean, baseball's fun in the playoffs. But we're going to start this conversation off, as you guys heard in the intro. We got a lot to cover because we're covering everything today, because it's been a long time since we talked some football. So we definitely need to mention those teams in there. So we're going to start with our March Madness bracket. So guys, crazy first, week of March Madness. What did you enjoy that first round?
It lived up to the hype, as it pretty much always does, right? I can recall a couple times where I was sitting down watching some of these games. They're coming down to the wire, and my girlfriend, she loves watching some sports, like basketball. She'll only tune in for few games here and there, but March Madness, it comes down to the wire, and I'm like, babe, you gotta watch this. Come over here, watch this. She watches the end of some of these, and some of them end up in the buzzer beaters, and she just sits there all wide-eyed. It's just fantastic. I love March Madness.
Yeah, no, it was great. Obviously got a chance to watch all these games, and it was so, entertaining. I was surprised with, how many of these games came down to the wire, how fun it was the first round, the upsets that came through. It was great. And when we look at our bracket here now, we have it pulled up. We did pretty well. We're ranked. We're tied for 641,000 in the world.
We're up there.
I think we did pretty well. I think we got so when we look at our bracket, we crushed the East. Outside of we bet on the South Florida with Michael Brown out, and UCF. We gambled on UCF, but we got the Sweet 16 right over here on this side. It was really the South side, where no one saw Iowa beating Florida, which was crazy. And obviously Nebraska made it there as well. These are, so Iowa's kind of the Cinderella team, along with Texas on the other side.
Iowa's good, man. I mean, put some respect on their name for sure. That was a solid, shout out Keegan Murray for sure. That was a solid game from them. I mean, that was probably their best game that they could have put together. Mm-hmm. And Florida had to make a lot of mistakes down the stretch as well. But I mean, just hell of a game.
Yeah, now we got the battle for, the corn, the states that say that they make the best corn or have the most corn, whatever their beef is over there. So it's going to be a Midwest brawl. And a cool spot for Nebraska. This was their first tourney run, and they, got a win, got a couple wins here, and now they're making it to the Sweet 16. So this will be their first opportunity too. And then we got Houston, Illinois. That one's going to be a banger. We got Tennessee, Iowa State over here, correct. That one's going to be awesome. Our Cinderella team in Akron, disappointed. Alabama's playing really well, though. So Michigan, Alabama's going to be a really fun game.
What's crazy is, if Akron put together the run that we wanted them to, we nail the Midwest.
That's true. Yeah, we did pretty well here. So, bits and pieces. We're going to lose points here towards the back end. But I think, if we can get Houston in here, if we get these two right with Michigan and Iowa State, I mean, we're sitting pretty over here, especially if we got Michigan State too. And when we get to the West, Arizona hung in there. They kept Utah State in the fight towards the end. Arizona was up 18 and got it down to 4 points by the end of the
It
game.
was
But
sketchy.
couple good Jaden Bradley buckets and some good time, and Braden Burry's three. It ended up working out, and I feel really good going into against Arkansas. But it's gonna be a fun game because Darius Acuff is playing really well so
He
far.
is, and there's been a lot of rumors about him being a top prospect among the Sacramento Kings front office. So
Future King Darius Acuff.
We'll see.
I'm nervous about that though because it's like we talk about the pillars, right? The pillars, and there's tape on him that
no defense,
no defense, and that makes it's one. It's one thing if we already had like a Caleb Wilson type of player in the build. Maybe Dylan Cardwell, I guess, would be the defensive comparison, but like someone who is incredibly talented that could assist him. Like Raynaud's a good defender, and we'll talk about him later when we talk about the Kings. But we need more help defensively there. So I'm worried about a guy like Acuff, but we're gonna do a lottery sim, so we'll see if it ends up being in a spot where maybe he is just the best player. So when we look at Arizona and Arkansas, I think it's going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be a contested game. I mean, they have a couple good players there on Arkansas that really caught my attention, like Malik Thomas. I think that it was Malik Thomas and Darius Acuff are the last duo since Zion and RJ Barrett to come into the Sweet 16 averaging 20 plus points in the tournament. So those are the two only duos that have done it. So they're playing really well. So if you're going to challenge a really good team like Arizona, having that star power is going to make it difficult. And they got good size. I was surprised with how athletic they are. So it's going to be an interesting fight, but I think Arizona will, hopefully will prevail. That's what we're pulling for over here on our bracket.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, Arizona is a 7.5 point favorite right now.
Solid.
So, I mean, that's, at this point in the tourney to be that kind of a favorite, it shows kind of where the team is at. And I mean, just from a defensive standpoint, Arizona is the bigger, better defensive team in this case. So I think that, down the stretch, that's going to matter.
Yeah, and when we look at who they could end up going up against in the Elite Eight, it could be a matchup with Purdue or former Arizona head coach Sean Miller in Texas, who have pulled off 2 upsets against BYU and Gonzaga. So that's it's a really interesting spot that Arizona could get into, especially if Texas pulls off another upset somehow, which I don't see, but it would be. We've been doubting them the whole time. Maybe it's their Cinderella run as the 11th seed. So yeah, this was kind of a preview of our bracket here. Let's make some fun. We're just gonna rapid fire these picks here. We're gonna go through each one and just say who we think is moving on. So Duke St. John's, who do you got?
I got Duke. I mean, they woke up against TCU, right?
Yeah.
At first it was a little sus. It was a sus win, and you didn't really know how they were going to go. And when we were talking about Duke in general, we were like, are the injuries going to catch up to them? But this last game against TCU, I think they woke up. They realized they're in this thing. They got to kind of show up. So I'm taking Duke in this matchup.
For the sake of the bracket, I hope Duke wins. But at the same time, I think if I'm picking, I would pick St. John's in this spot. Yeah. I think that St. John's, coming off of a good win against Kansas. St. John's, Rick Pitino, he's been here. He's a very accomplished coach. He coaches hard, and this team plays hard. They're a super tall, lanky, defensive-oriented team, and this will be a good test for the Boozer Bros, and that team. Boozer is going to go up against a lot of guys that will play, that he's going to see that kind of style of play once he gets to the NBA. So I think this will be a good litmus test for him, especially because he's kind of been overthinking things in the tourney. So I'm picking St. John's here, but for the bracket, obviously, I hope we continue over here. So then we got Michigan State, UConn. How are you feeling about this one?
I mean, I feel like this could be a really interesting matchup between these two. It's one of those situations where I kind of feel like I got to go with the bracket. I feel like Michigan State is probably going to be the top team. But we've seen UConn make these runs before. And, they had a couple good wins here. We'll see if they can kind of carry the momentum. But I feel Michigan State's probably the pick here. Yeah, I'm picking Michigan State too. I think both teams have been playing really well. And this will be a battle against 2 awesome head coaches who have done a lot in college basketball. And Hurley, as fiery as a character as he is, if there's one coach he's voiced that he's respected, it is Tom Izzo. So that'll be a fun matchup there. So then we got the battle at the core, and it'll be Iowa, Nebraska. Who do we think is coming out on this one? Oh, what do you think? I would say, honestly, my hope is that Iowa does
pull it off somehow and keep the Cinderella run going for them. But I do think Nebraska is the better team. But Iowa's just been shaky, but they're on a heater right now, and they've been playing. The vibes are all the way up, and Nebraska's coming off of victories where, they kind of were in control for most of the game. I mean, the Vanderbilt one was pretty close,
Yeah.
but they did really just take control of it at the end there. So I think that, I think Nebraska is going to be able to pull this one out and move on.
Yeah, I think that, you kind of said it best. Like Nebraska, they've had a control of their tournament so far. They haven't really been tested in a sense of being down by a bunch or anything like that. Iowa saw a hell of a test against Florida, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, all the way through, they were playing really well, really, really solid basketball the entire game, all 40 minutes. And so, what it would take against a team like holy crap, against Nebraska, it's going to take another 40 minutes of solid basketball. So, if they can do that, they're going to stand a chance. But I feel like Nebraska's probably the take here.
That's good. Yeah. So we'll go with Nebraska here. And then we got Illinois, Houston. And I'm feeling Houston. This is going to be a battle. Illinois is playing awesome. Yeah. Their offense is peaking. Stojakovic is getting some good run too. He's looking good. But I trust Houston's physicality and their athleticism. I think for a guy like Keaton Wagler, who is like Tyrese Halliburton light with the style that he plays, physicality is going to be something that he, has to show that he can work through. So, Houston is one of the most physical teams out there. So I think it's going to cause a little bit of trouble for them.
Yeah. And I think that Houston's got just a little bit more firepower too. And, they've also been at this stage before, many times. So sure. I think that Houston's probably like the safe choice here, but I would love to see Illinois make it just for Paige's kiddo.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be fun. So then we'll move on to Michigan, Iowa State. This is probably the most closely contested game we'll get of the bunch. Like, Iowa State's such a good defensive team, but Michigan has been one of the top 3 best teams in the league this season. So Iowa State's going to make this fun. They're going to make it really interesting, but Michigan State is a really good team. Or Michigan is a really good team. And I think Michigan's going to move on.
Yeah. I don't really have too much of a breakdown here. I really think that it's Michigan. It would be interesting to see if Iowa State wins, but I really do think Michigan's got this.
Yeah, for all the lottery picks that'll be in this tournament. So for that remain in this tournament, Yaxel Ledenborg is one of those guys who we can pay attention to, especially if he can make a deep run. He's one of the seniors in this class, so his draft stock, is late lottery because of that. But he can, catapult himself to the right team if he continues to extend this run. So we'll see about that. Then we got Purdue, Texas. Do we think Purdue, rolls, or do we think Texas keeps the Cinderella run going?
Texas is playing good basketball, man. I mean, they're playing their game. They're not really being taken outside of their element in a lot of ways. I can totally see a scenario where Texas wins this, but I think I feel more comfortable taking Purdue again, similar to my last thing of just they've kind of been at this stage before.
For sure.
So I think I'd probably lean Purdue.
Yeah, I think Purdue is the choice in this one, but I will be rooting pretty hard for Texas in this one.
Yeah.
And then we got Arizona, Arkansas. Obviously, we picked Arizona to go. I'm picking Arizona, but you know what? This is gonna be a tough game, and it's gonna be close. I think the spread 7, like you said, but this could be. I could see this being like a 86-82 kind of game, and it's gonna be fun. Arizona's gonna get tested, but I think that Acuff's gonna have a big game. I'm excited to see how he does against Jaden Bradley, Braden Burries, like the defensive guys that we're gonna be able to put on him. I'm interested to see how they defend him. Krivas was an animal on the boards against Utah State with all his offensive rebounds.
Yeah,
and he was incredible on the defensive end, but Utah State didn't have a guy like Acuff who can shoot from absolutely anywhere. And I feel like if he gets matched up on Krivas with enough space, he's just going to pull those shots. So it is one of those things that if Acuff gets going, it's going to be an interesting game. But I think Arizona has it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to be honest. I think Arizona's not really going to make this one close. I think you're going to see probably like a 10-point or more
fire
kind of a game out of them. And the reason I say that is because I think Utah State kind of caught them off guard. I don't think Arkansas is going to be able to catch Arizona off guard. Arizona knows who they're going up against. They know who's on the other side of the basketball in this sense. Utah State, it was really a collective effort to pull that lead back, from 18 down and get back into that game. It was a crawl back into the game scenario, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like if Arizona learned anything from the last game, it's that you gotta stay foot on the gas the entire time. And I think against a team like Arkansas, you kind of know going in you got to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is gonna be so great. I mean, John Calipari, this is gonna be a battle. Him and Tommy Lloyd, and for Arizona again, they haven't made a Final Four run since 90 or since 2001. So this is something that would be huge for Arizona. It'd be super fun to experience. So hopefully that game's tomorrow night. Hopefully Arizona comes out on top. So that was our bracket. Kind of how we've done so far. I think it's pretty good. Both we had individual brackets that we had with our boy Liebert, and we had one for ourselves too, but we collectively did better on the BTB one than we did on the personal one. So I think that's a good positive side.
And it's funny because like on my personal one I nailed the Midwest,
Yeah,
and we were still only one pick away from the collective, only because we took Akron in the Cinderella run. But if we stayed true to it and didn't take Akron in that Cinderella run, we would have nailed the Midwest in this bracket too.
I know, it was crazy. I started off 8 for 8, and I was all hyped up, and then it just obviously it fell apart after everyone everyone's bracket probably fell apart after the VCU North Carolina game. That was a crazy one too. So with that, we'll talk about we'll keep up with the March Madness and how that ends up finishing, and we'll definitely have more to speak on there. So bear down, go Arizona. Hopefully they keep it pushing. So we stay on basketball. We're going to talk about our beloved Sacramento Kings. Listen, if I had told you that we're on prior to last night, again, which was a pretty big loss against the Charlotte Hornets,
44 points.
We were 5-3 in the 8 games before that. That's weird to think. That's weird to say. But obviously it wasn't world beaters we were beating. But we had a couple good, like legit, solid wins in there where playoff teams are kicking themselves because they lost to us. But that's exciting. I think to see some of the way that these young guys are buying in, and the way that Russ, DeRozan, and Malik all seem to finally have gotten to the point of, hey, we're just gonna feed the young guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just learned in this you can really say the last 10, 15 game stretch, a lot about the direction this front office wants to take this thing. And that is that they're going culture first. Their goal for the season wasn't to tank and try and get the number 1 pick. And after the All-Star break, their goal wasn't to tank and go for the number 1 pick. No, the goal has been always, since Scott Perry took over, to establish a culture here. And I think a lot of ways the best way to do that is through winning basketball. And the kind of growth that you've seen from these rookies and these young guys with the veteran leadership from Russell Westbrook and DeMar DeRozan has been awesome in a lot of ways. And so, like, for me, we've kind of already talked about this before, and you asked, like, would you value the pick over the winning? And I kind of said it was like I would rather see them put together some winning basketball here to build that culture, and I'm sticking to that. Like, I'm doubling down on it. Like, your odds are never in your favor to land the number 1 pick, even if you are the worst team, right? So already your odds to get the number 1 pick are so slim. You might as well try and build a little bit of culture, get some happiness, get some joy back in the building, because this has been such a dog water season for the Kings. It's been the worst season in Sacramento Kings history. That to be able to get a little bit of momentum, something to kind of build on at the end of the season here, I think is really special for them.
No, absolutely. I think that what they're doing is establishing good habits, and I think that's what. At first, it was insulting the way that other teams were getting targeted for the way that they were tanking, like the Pacers and the Jazz. Right? We're like, hey guys, we're the worst. Like, at least punish us and call us out for being the worst, right? But like you said, we weren't trying to be the worst. It just kind of ended up being that way. And, these last 10 games are going to be a lot more losing because more injuries have struck the team. Nick Clifford got hurt not in the game before the Hornets game. And obviously Russ was out these past couple games.
Injury.
And everyone else has been hurt. And we played with 8 dudes last game against the Hornets. So we were seeing guys like Devin Carter get the start. Daquan Plowden was playing a lot of minutes. Dylan Cardwell, he had 5 fouls pretty quick. And that 4-star hand, we really didn't have much to work with. But on that 5-3 stretch, we had a good mix of, Russ was playing games and DeRozan was playing really well. Malik came back from his injury. Precious was still there at the time, and then he got hurt like midway through. But they really emphasized, and I think we were talking about it, like as we were watching these games, they emphasized getting the ball. It almost felt like they were force feeding like Maxime Raynaud, and Nick Clifford was getting way more shots. Like they were finally letting them, learn and get these reps. And now we're seeing Maxime develop into an all, potential first team all rookie candidate. He is at least going to make one of the two teams.
Mm-hmm.
So to get that kind of performance from him, which was something we were really hoping for coming out of the All-Star break. I think, since the All-Star break, he's averaging 17-9 with 2 assists, but he's shooting like 55% from the field. He's hitting threes, and he's taking a lot of shots, and he had back-to-back 30-point games. And so, like, all in this, he's taken on a bigger role. He's making the most of his time, and he's making mistakes, but him, Nick Clifford, Plowden, and Carter are finally getting reps, and I really have enjoyed watching them grow, because even if we're losing by 40, I'm watching Maxime do good things, and that's like exciting to me.
Yeah, it has been. It's been a nice stretch, and I will say too, like I briefly touched on it a couple minutes ago with how great of a veteran presence like Russell Westbrook and DeMar have been. On top of that, albeit it's been such a bad season for the Kings, how special has it been to be able to watch Russell Westbrook, stack these historical numbers and move his way up in the ranks in the all-time list. Same with DeMar DeRozan. To be able to see both these guys, it kind of extend their careers, obviously, in the length, but to also just extend what they're so good at in Sacramento. I think it's been really special to watch those two, just do what they do best here in Sacramento and play free. So I've enjoyed that.
Yeah, let me ask you something. Look, because we're seeing this progress now, right? So, and we talk about, the NBA came out and released their salary cap projection for next year, and it's going down $1 million. So it's not like the Kings are going to get like an extra $10 million to play with, right? And we're already close to the luxury. We have to make cost-effective moves, and it seems like the most cost-effective moves would just be to keep the majority of the assets we already have on the roster. So how would you feel, going into next season? Obviously, we're most likely still going to have Levine and Domas through the summer, and we'll probably try and figure something out by the deadline.
Yep.
But going into next year, and we're about to do the lottery sim here, we're going to add our first-round pick, whoever that may be, and then you add him potentially into the starting lineup. But then we look at our bench, and all of a sudden we have, we still have Malik, we still have Devin, unless we trade Malik, but we still have Devin. You'll have Daquan potentially if we have to offer him a qualifying offer and he has to sign. But like there's the opportunity to get Plowden. We'll have Maxime. We'll have, potentially Precious if he resigns with us. I hope he goes to a better team that,
he deserves it.
He deserves that. But we're going to have, and we'll have Dylan, we'll have guys here. And then we add a young guy in the first round. I feel like we roll that out with the vets that we have, and after an off season of them being healthy, like a whole season of them being healthy, we try it again next year. Do you feel better going into next season than you would coming into this season? Especially once, Keegan, DeAndre too, like we have pieces to play with now.
Yeah, I do, because, going into this season, it was a lot of just throwing a whole bunch of, noodles at the wall to see what sticks, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you've kind of figured out what's sticking now, and to be able to know the direction that you want to take things now, and the key guys, the development guys that you want on this roster moving forward, and you named all of them off. I think if you know that direction at that point, who you want on your team. I think it's a lot different of a feeling going into a season. Also, the expectation isn't going to be super high.
That's true.
Because we've already recognized from a fan base perspective, from a media perspective, that the Kings, this rebuild is going to take like 4 years.
Finally. So
like
we realized now we caught up.
This is the reality of it. Like, this is the reality of a true rebuild, and the Kings are in the midst of it. They're beginning stages of it, but nonetheless, they're in it. And so I think if you recognize that and you accept that, it's going to be a lot easier of a pill to swallow by running back a lot of the same roster and recognizing that, yeah, we have some really solid pieces to work with here.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what we do in the offseason, who ends up leaving, because it's not going to be exactly the same. So who ends
Right.
up going, who ends up staying? DeMar, will he leave, and then what does that open up? Is DeAndre Hunter just going to replace them, or is he a piece that's movable still for next year? If we want to package him and Malik for someone bigger or something like that, I don't know. Like, possibilities are there, and I think it felt like, because the season was heading the way it was at the time of the deadline, we were like, let's just get this over with and get this accelerate this crap.
Yeah.
But our hands were tied, and Scott could only do so much. So I don't expect us to do that much this summer. So that's because, fortunately, what we've been getting from these young guys, I think, warrants more of a look next year, even if it is a limited role. And I'm interested to see, once Maxime comes back, with the way he's shooting, how he plays with Domas, what kind of role do they expect Neek to have? And the biggest question is, who are we going to be adding in this scenario? So let's go to the draft lottery sim here and try our luck again. Now, because we had a nice little run, we're now all the way up in 4th, and that's just an interesting spot to be in here. So let's make sure we got everything right here. Yep, as it was. So, okay. We haven't got, since doing this, we have yet to get the first overall pick here. We've gotten as high as 2nd, and we've gone as far as 5th. Now we have the opportunity to go even further back. So let's see how this ends up. Here we go. Oh, the Jazz. We're 6th. Wow, that's terrible. See, in this spot, that's almost like the worst case. Actually,
would Acuff be on the board at that point?
It really does depend. I mean, let's look at. We got Utah. They can go anyone they want.
Yeah.
I don't know if they take AJ.
They might not.
Well, no, they have Keontae. So actually, yeah, they would take AJ. They don't need him unless they take Darren. Because Utah has some options. Chicago.
So let's just say Darren and AJ are number 1 and 2, because I think that's how it's going to play out in this case.
Yeah. So then Washington at 3, they'll probably take Boozer or Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Or they might take Acuff. Washington might be tempted to take Acuff, but do they? Oh, no, they have Trey.
They have Trey now, so I don't think they would need to.
So, yeah, it would probably be Boozer, Wilson. And then Brooklyn, they could pick anyone they want, honestly. Yeah. So it's going to be either Wilson or Boozer, most likely, in that scenario, which would leave us with either Acuff so this one, it says the Clippers.
I would go to the Clippers.
So the Clippers would get this pick. They might take Acuff at that spot.
I think they would.
So they would take Acuff there because they get Kawhi already. Yeah, so you could pair them. And then Sacramento, it's our pick of like Kingston, Keaton Wagler.
I wouldn't be mad with Kingston Fleming here.
Yeah,
I really wouldn't.
At 6, I think he'd be a good consolation prize, especially if it feels better taking him here than it would be taking him at like 3. Then you're like, then it would have felt like a reach. But I think at 6, it's a good spot.
True. Well, and we also brought up the fact that there's potential, not that we've heard any reports of it, but there's always potential to move back into late lottery by packaging a pick. So, you trade back and who knows what things look like then. But I think, if the board fell this way and everything lined up that way, I think Fleming's here would be a pretty solid pick.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I would say Fleming's would be the pick here too. So, we add Flemings into the mix in this hypothetical scenario, right? And that would fix Russell Westbrook's gone. We have our point guard of the future. Him and Devin Carter can be and with Malik Monk, that's like our true guard rotation with Neek. Like that would work. Mm-hmm. Dude, if I'm being honest, if I want to put like my stamp on it now, if I could pick anybody in this draft, if I wasn't the first overall pick, if we had first, I'm picking AJ. Mm-hmm. I think that's like clear cut. But I think my second favorite player is Caleb Wilson.
Interesting.
And I would pick him too. He just has a motor and a ceiling that we haven't had ever. He won't be as dominant as a Boogie Cousins style wise, but he'll be so impactful all over the floor. And he's so competitive. I love everything that Wilson brings to the table. He brings winning basketball and just freaky length and athleticism that would just make us way different as a team, because if you're putting him next to Domas, he can mitigate the defense, and Keegan, him and as a forward duo, that would be unstoppable defensively. I just think it would be really enticing to get bigger that way with someone like Caleb Wilson too.
Yeah, I think the Kings do need a form of athleticism on the team and somebody who can kind of do it all in a lot of ways. And yeah, I don't think he would be a bad pick by any stretch. I think you made an interesting comment the other day. We were texting back and forth,
Yeah.
and you were like, I feel like he's kind of flying under the radar right now, because he's not, a part of March Madness
Right.
because of that finger injury. He's out for the rest of the year. So, you made the comment that like, come the combine, if he's good to go, when he's good to go, like he's going to be opening eyes again, and this whole thing is going to kind of you're going to see the kind of player that he is. And I think that I think you're onto something there. Like, before the injury, Caleb Wilson was awesome. Like he was cooking for UNC, and he is one of those do it all players in a lot of ways. So I think for the Kings, like picking him at that point, they might be scrutinized if if we have the second pick,
Right, and we pick him,
and we pick him, but
I would mean that.
it's also one of those situations where it's like you pick him at number 2, you get scrutinized up front, but then 3 years down the road when he's a star player or he's at least a really, really solid starter on a playoff team, hopefully at that point, you're like, yeah, damn right, that was a great pick.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what makes this draft in particular so interesting, because it feels like there's a lot of guys that if they end up on the right team, they could be serious difference makers. And I think a guy like, I'm not going to be pissed if we end up with a Darren Peterson. I think that like as an NBA player, he's going to be incredible. So who knows? Like maybe we luck into that, because Caleb Wilson propels himself into the top 3. All of a sudden they, Debansta, Boozer, and Wilson go top 3, and all of a sudden we luck into, a chance at Darren Peterson at 4. So that's why for like, we are going to lose more games. So I think that we are going to, because we're just so banged up, I think the Kings are in a position where we got that glimpse of the future of what it looks like. But now we're in that nice sweet spot where we are going to lose games, and we're probably going to finish right at 4th. So, we're going to hopefully be at like the worst of 6 spots. And then we talked about this particular scenario. If this ends up being the most likely scenario, it's not like it's like a B if we end up with Kingston. But like, we still are right there at a shot at like an A+ move. So that's what I'm excited for.
Yeah, 100%. I think that the general consensus right now is that, the Kings they're not going to win many more games due to the injuries, due to everything. And you look at the rest of their schedule too, they're playing teams that are contending for the playoffs. So like it is kind of a good thing in a lot of ways. And you nailed it on the head. Like we got a glimpse of the future. That was what we wanted to see. And I think like if season ended today and you look at our 2 rookies, I mean, I know you were going to agree with me. Like the best rookie this season, the guy who's done it all, who's been the biggest bright spot for the Kings, almost in general, has been Maxime Raynaud. And I think that in and of itself, while this season has been so poor, that in and of itself, the fact that if we remember, Scott Perry had to, he had to trade to get into the first round. Obviously, he took Maxime Raynaud in the second round, but like these were basically his first couple moves as a general manager for the Sacramento Kings. And both these rookies have shown that they're capable of being, NBA players and potentially doing something special. Yeah. So we've seen the flashes, we've seen what they're capable of. And for Maxime Raynaud, I think like, personally, biased or not, I think that he should be first team all rookie.
Agreed.
You look at what he's done on the double-double side of things, like he leads all rookies in double-doubles. This last stretch of the 30 games, the back-to-back 30 games, like there's just so many moments this season where you can point to him and say like, other than the 8 to 10 game rookie wall that he hit, he's been fantastic and so reliable for this team. So I really like what I've seen from Maxime Raynaud, and I think that he'd be like my number 1 guy for the team this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we asked the role that he's been asked to take on, I mean, Domas has played 19 games this year. So he compared to some of these other rookies, especially ones towards the top of the board, he's got a ton of minutes and he's gotten a ton of reps. Like he deserves, I was listening to the Low podcast and he was kind of saying the same thing. He's like, don't punish him for being on Sacramento. He's been he's been the best rookie big man of the year. And, with Derek Queen's played really well, but he's gone in and out of the lineup. Maxine has been consistently our starter, and he's gotten better as the season's gone on. And like, you see that they talk about this a lot, especially with rookies, is like, you want to see that post All-Star break of the first year does matter, because you see some guys make huge jumps from the first half to the second half of their rookie season because they start getting it a little bit more. And I do think part of it is the fact that the team as a whole decided we're going to try and see what we can do with Max. And I think part of that, for these players does matter, that the team has to believe in you in the vision. And I think that's what it shows, though, is that he's putting up good numbers. They're trying to make him a focal point, and he's stepping up to the task as good as he can. And I mean, his defense leaves a lot to be desired, but he's still so young. He's still 22. Like, I know it's not young compared to some of these 19-year-olds that come in with more potential, but at the 42nd pick, you got an established player who is translating and has potential to be something different with the way that he's shooting the three ball. All of a sudden, he can turn into a 3-level scorer, and that's something that we would love to have, and it's a skill set that we desperately need. So I think he's been incredible this year, and I've been really, really happy with, that, again, him, Neek, and Dylan. You gotta give Scott Perry his credit. He did draft really well. These guys are all hits. Obviously, we still got to see more, for the long term. But so far, in a bad season, having your rookie stand out is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, do you have any final thoughts on the Kings before we move on here?
Let's light a couple more beams, but let's make sure we don't light too many at this point. I've seen enough wins. I got my wish. Like get a couple more, but I think the fourth worst team is about where I want to land. So.
Yes, exactly. That's and that'll make the lottery even more fun. And we're definitely planning on having a kind of live reaction to the lottery to see where we end up, and then we get to have some real draft talk as the draft season begins. But we move on to the NFL, where it is draft season. It's next month is the draft at the end of April, and it makes this this is one of some of my favorite time of the year because we start hearing news. But there's been a lot of news around the league in general, as little moves are still being made, cap space is being opened up. We're seeing a lot of things happen with our teams. But we'll start with the team of the year, with the 49ers over here, planning for their retooling, ready to go on another run. But there are a couple moves that have been made, and a couple things to discuss for the San Francisco 49ers since we've last spoke. So I will let you take the wheel and go for it. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so I mean the 49ers, they've made some really solid moves in free agency. And we kind of talked about this weeks ago before free agency started. It was the week before it actually. And I mentioned, like, traditionally the 49ers, which under John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, they just aren't that active in the first apron of free agency.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I fully expect more of the same. They might get one or two guys. And then second wave of free agency, they'll probably, kind of take the lid off things and sign some guys for cheaper deals. They've absolutely been probably the most and one of the most active teams in free agency so far. And the moves that they're making, so, just to quickly rehash it, like sign Mike Evans, you sign Christian Kirk, Nate Hobbs, cornerback Nate Hobbs. Then you bring back a familiar face in Dre Greenlaw. Fred Warner's hyped about that. He said he was hyped. He's saying like there's just a rapport that those two have. There's a communication and a chemistry they have where they don't even have to talk to each other on the field. Like that was a really solid move. Going and getting Vidarian Lowe, Brett Toth, Robert Jones, is coming off of a neck injury, didn't play last year, but played 17 games under Mike McDaniels over in Miami. Mm-hmm. That's a Shanahan system. So
that's true.
All these moves. Oh, and then Corliss Wayman, who is technically a better punter than what we had before, and one of the better punters since Prime Wish, which I don't think Wishnowsky really ever left his prime. But I really like the moves that they're making. Now, what's interesting, Marcos, is all these moves. Every single one, I'm a big social media guy. Like I see the signing happen, I go into the comments and I just read. I read for days. And everybody in 49ers fan base, like all the 49er faithful, they love the moves that are happening. They love the kind of tools that we brought into the building. They love the familiar face we brought back. Like everything that they've done, we've absolutely been behind. The flip side of it is the rest of the NFL and the rest of the NFL fan base. Everybody's looking at these players who have these prior injuries. You look at a lot of these guys, like a Robert Jones coming off the neck injury, like a Christian Kirk coming off an ACL, I believe. With Mike Evans having his injury as well, with the calf injury recurring. Like certain guys here that they've signed to these extensions, they're like, these are banged up, players who are coming into San Francisco, right next to, you know, the power plant, the substation that is absolutely taking some lives here, it seems like. So my whole thing that I want to kind of bring to the table here, because I just rehashed a bit of free agency for the 49ers, is this is the kind of retooling that the 49ers needed to make for one or two last runs at a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And what this tells me is the 49ers, you look at all these signings, they're 1 and 2 years outside of like Mike Evans, he's a 3-year deal. All these deals, low guarantees, high incentive base. They want these guys to work for it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And all these guys, considering the 2-year basically window, it just seems like the window to win a Super Bowl for the 49ers is 2 years. The organization recognizes that.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be a consensus that I stand firmly behind.
Mm-hmm.
We talked last year about what the window for, you know, a lot of these twilighting players on the 49ers could be.
Mm-hmm.
I think based on the free agency signings in the 2-year window that they basically created, I think there is an understanding in the building there's 2 years left with these core guys to win a Super Bowl, and they're going all in. So personally, I love it.
Right.
From an outside perspective, I mean, you guys got your Super Bowls, right?
Pretty locked
You've seen 2 Super Bowls within the last 30 years. 49ers haven't. And Howie makes traditionally really good decisions.
Mm-hmm.
From an outside perspective, what does this kind of look like? You know, when you look in, you see a lot of these guys being signed by the 49ers.
I think it's I would believe that from the outside looking in, I think people are like, oh, why would the Niners? I think people forget that the Niners won 13 games last year with everything that happened, right? So I think that for those who know ball, for those who pay attention and respect the Niners for who they are, even if they're not their team, these moves are we are going for it moves.
Yep.
And I like the way that John Lynch has gone about this, because it is very Howie-esque in the sense of like, you know, Howie's doing the same things with just you're filling in gaps with reliable pieces. Yes, some of them are going to be coming off injury, some of them, you know, have to prove it. But they're dart throws, and they're dart throws that don't cost you, you know, you're not shelling everything out for him. It's not an all-in move. If the most all-in move here is the Odigizua trade and, you know, Mike Evans, those are two very good moves that make your team better. So like I think that the Niners, what this signals is that they are, what you said, going for it.
Mm-hmm.
They have their core. Like this is like it feels like this is for the twilight of the old guys. You know, this is going to be the last stretch for Warner. This is going to be the last stretch for Kittle and Bosa. And then they're going to pivot on to these young guys that they either draft this year or the guys that they've already brought into the building, and let Brock Purdy be the face of the Niners for the future and let him carry the torch with these new whatever weapons whoever you draft, like things like that. That's what it signals to me. It's like this window, the Niners recognize, like, we know we have these stars, but how long are they really going to last before we have to say goodbye and get better? So that's kind of what I'm seeing. I think that the Niners are prepping for a run if everything goes well.
Yep.
And a get out of jail free card, not free, but get out without, you know, taking severe damage if things, you know, end up happening like how they did last year.
Yeah, all of this was a low risk, high reward situation for the 49ers. And honestly, like, this is how it needed to be done if you wanted to take this kind of a run at things. You know, you take these stabs like this, you take these dart throws like you said, and you're not throwing 4-year contracts at these guys. Yeah. You're throwing these 1 and 2 year deals at them with low guarantees, high incentive contracts where it's like, you know, go out and prove that that you can be healthy this season, that you can hit these milestones, and we're going to make this worth it for you. If you don't, you know, it didn't work out. Sorry. But this is a business. It's a 1 year, it's a 2 year. Yeah. You know, so they've set their players up for something to work for, which I think is super fantastic. And it gives these guys a lot of reason to work really hard this season and next. They've also set themselves up where they're not shooting themselves in the foot. And I think in a lot of ways, like this has been I think the best free agency that John Lynch and Shanahan have had together. I can't
Okay.
recall one that they've had that was better, other than maybe setting up the initial Super Bowl runs. But like this was like they recognize they're all on the same page. They recognize the goals that they have. They recognize the timetable that they have to get this thing done in, and they've made the right moves to do so. And you're able to get a Hall of Famer like Mike Evans in the door, a Hall of Famer that wanted to come to your team, right? Like he looked at your quarterback and said, "That's a great quarterback." He looked at your offensive coordinator and said, "That's a great offensive coordinator. Like this is a winning organization. I want to be a part of this." After 12 years with the Buccaneers. Right. That's not easy to do unless it's a team like the 49ers who have traditional winning ways and traditional winning standards. So I love what the 49ers are doing, and I wanted to address that on the pod because I've seen a lot of NFL reacting in certain ways, and it's mainly just like NFL fans from other teams that are like, y'all are bringing in all these injury-prone players that you guys can't stand. And look, it's a legit argument, but then you see it from like the media. Like I saw recently, someone from Sports Illustrated came out with something and said that like he had to pinpoint one thing that the 49ers did wrong in free agency. He couldn't. He literally could not.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And I can't help but like agree with that kind of thinking because everything that I've seen, I've loved it. Now, the most recent thing is the last thing I'll address here was Brian Robinson Jr. He's on his way out. He's heading to Atlanta to play with the other B. Robinson, and it's going to create a lot of fun fantasy problems, I'm sure, for the drafts at the start. But wish him all the best over there in Atlanta. Hopefully, he gets some runs. I wanted to see him. I mean, I texted you many times. I wanted to see him in packages on the goal line because he's a power runner. I felt like we just kept running Christian McCaffrey into a brick wall every single time on the goal line. And if you're going to do that, you go with a power runner. So, I'm hoping he gets those kind of sets in Atlanta. We'll see because, typically Bijan just likes to just run it in from 40 and it doesn't even matter about the goal line. But nothing but the best for him. And as for the 49ers faithful, if you're wondering like what is going to happen at that position, it's probably not going to be the draft. The draft is not super deep from a running back perspective. We'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. But don't forget, the 49ers have Jordan James, who they drafted just a season ago. And Jordan James was plotted to be the running back 2 to start the season last year prior to the deadline last second trade that they made before the season to get Brian Robinson Jr. So just keep that in mind as you move forward here also with Isaac Guerrero right behind him. So there's some solid pieces to still have a really good room, and especially if Christian McCaffrey can stay healthy. I mean, knowing Kyle Shanahan, the other two guys aren't going to get any run, right? Yeah. So we'll see how this thing shakes down, but again, to cap it all off, I'm really proud of what the 49ers are doing, and I'm stoked for this season.
I wanted to pose a question to you just because to kind of emphasize, the moves that have been made. Let's assume, everyone comes back healthy. I know Kittle's timeline's a little different, but let's say we got Warner and Bosa back on time,
and Michael, and
So you got those guys that were hurt early in the season back. Yeah. It's going to be week 1, pretty much everyone except Kittle, plus these moves that you made. Obviously, not everyone's going to hit the 53-man roster, but your roster seems better. Is there a glaring hole on this roster right now, personally, that you feel?
It's interesting because going into the draft, I still feel like it's the offensive line. They've made some solid signings with the offensive line, which I talked about, in Lowe, Toth, and Jones. But what they've really done is created more of like a training camp battle. And again, on these 1-year deals, something you can easily get out of kind of thing. So I think that like, if I had to look at like kind of the glaring hole, I would say, what did the Eagles do the best in the year that they won, 2 years ago? Well, they won in the trenches on both sides of the football, right? So I'm looking to do more of the same. Like, there's still holes across the roster. Like, you wonder about that safety room a little bit. You wonder how deep it is past, Mustafa and them. But, like, overall, like, I look at that secondary and I'm like, that ain't a bad secondary. And adding Nate Hobbs to that cornerback room was a solid acquisition too. But, like, I just feel like if you can really firm up those trenches on both sides of the football, offense and defensive line, and you can get solid pieces from a depth standpoint as well, which they're looking like they're starting to gear up for, but you can do that with the draft this year especially. I think that's kind of the next step for them. So this is a little bit of a I guess, a little sneak peek at kind of how my draft board would fall.
Yeah.
I'm definitely prioritizing the lines as kind of the things that I want to focus the most on, and that's where I see the biggest holes.
I love it. And I think so. I was trying to emphasize with like the moves that you guys made. It just shows that it helps when it comes to the draft, knowing that you don't have, oh man, like we need a linebacker, we need a cornerback too, we need like something specific that would get in the way of taking the best player at a specific position that you're looking for. So like if the best O lineman is the one that falls to you in that spot, or the best D lineman, then you're kind of in that sweet spot where you're like, we can take the best player available versus
Right.
having to specifically attack this one spot. So you can attack the trenches, and I think that's a really good approach for the Niners to take. And I think that, especially because you don't know for sure with the health of your trenches, it really is that has been the thing that stalls you guys every year, is your D lineman getting hurt,
Yep.
your O lineman getting hurt. So it is just one of those things that to get that insurance would be really nice. So yeah, no, I agree with you that this has been a better offseason than I anticipated for the Niners. I thought that like after the first kind of little wave of moves that was kind of going to be it, and I didn't anticipate that to really reload and really go for
Yeah.
it. So I think that the Niners are they're going to still be overlooked just because of the success of the Rams and how they look now, and then the Seahawks coming off of the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be there. You're always in that conversation, but I still think that gives you guys an advantage too, because it's like people are going to forget that you won 13 games last year, and I think that's something that can't be ignored, especially when it felt like a down year for you guys.
Yeah, and I mean, on that point, like, to be honest with you, I've seen a lot of these, top 10 way too early power rankings, post the first few weeks of free agency here. And the one that a lot of them that I've seen have the Niners anywhere from 3rd to 9th, and I haven't seen them outside of the top 10 in any one that I've looked at so far. And I've looked at a lot of them. So like, I think there's recognition of like what the 49ers are doing here. They recognize in general that the 49ers are gearing up for a Super Bowl run. And so I think you take into account, what they did last year, considering all the injuries. You take into account the kind of coaching you have in Kyle Shanahan. Let's be honest, he's a top 3. There's an argument to be a top 3 coach. He's definitely top 5 coach in the NFL. And I think you look at that, you factor in what John Lynch is doing, you factor in the health that they're hoping to get back by training camp. And you look at that roster and you're like, it's hard to see this 49ers roster as being anything outside of a top 10 roster on paper. So, if everything goes to plan, if everybody stays healthy and everything works out, like this 49ers team is going to compete week in and week out, no matter who is up against them. So it's going to be interesting. The last bit of note, I'm sorry. I forgot.
You're good.
It was announced today the 49ers are playing in obviously Australia.
Yes.
They're playing on Thursday. It'll be Friday over in Australia, but it'll be Thursday for the 49ers, which means that Seattle, because they won the Super Bowl, they'll be opening the season on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how the NFL did this, but I do got to say, like, props to the NFL for recognizing that the 49ers would have to travel 16 hours, be a crazy hour difference ahead. And so they recognize that for both teams, for the Rams and the 49ers, and they're giving them, essentially like a week and a half to come back, readjust, reacclimate, and then get back to the NFL season. Yeah. So I love that. I think that's the best case scenario if you're going to be playing a football game that far away. So I can say I'm pretty happy with that.
No, I like how they've done some of these international games. I think it's been interesting. Do I love it? I mean, not entirely, because it, for these players have come out and said it felt like, these games feel like a season of their own. I think the only team really used to it is the Jags, because they're basically the home team of London.
Yeah.
So it's like, and they get to stay there for 2 weeks. So it's like you get used to it when you play there. So that's kind of already unfair how they do that too. So it's just, they still have a lot of work to go for all these international games. Makes me worried, but it is cool getting to see football being played in some of these stadiums. I just hope for this, I hope that cricket stadium's good. I know they've hosted multiple kinds of events there, so I just hope, they don't have to deal with any slippage or, adjustment. There always feels like at a new field, you never know what you're going to get. So, but I'm excited for you guys, and I agree that it's good that they they're looking out for the health, of the players in that sense, trying to make sure they get enough rest to make it competitive, because it's just going to it's a totally different game that way. So, did you have any final thoughts?
No, I already did.
Fire. So, we're going to pivot on to the Eagles, and the Eagles made a lot of moves recently. Since the last time we spoke, They added to the edge with Arletta BK. He was like the third pass rusher on the Atlanta Falcons, so he comes into this system as kind of like a depth piece after we had to kind of pivot after losing Jalen Phillips. Um, and then we signed Hollywood Brown. That was an interesting signing. We also signed Elijah Moore this morning. We re-signed Fred Johnson this morning as well. Good for the O-line after we lost, Brett Toth. We need more. We needed to kind of we're really banking on Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens really returning back to form, but they both needed to go to Costa Rica to get you know, a special procedure. They both did the same thing, so it's interesting. But the fact, we've seen our some of our favorite guys go overseas to get certain specific type of treatments. It just makes me wonder. Cam Jurgens was actually on Bussin' with the Boys, and they were talking about like the tush push the Super Bowl season where he was hurt. And he said, "Yeah, my back was basically broken." And when we ran it that one sequence when they ran it 4 times, um, he's like, "I had to go." He's like, "I wouldn't even talk to the coaches. I was so mad at them for having us just go for it." And he was describing the experience in general, and I was like, "It is interesting finally kind of getting that honest perspective." I mean, Kelsey was honest about it when he did it, but Jurgens being put in a unique spot, so he wasn't really healthy last year, and it definitely showed. Um, so we're really banking on these guys that have been getting hurt recently staying healthy, and that does make me a little bit worried. And we'll see what the draft does for the Eagles, and they will probably reload. I don't know if it's going to be our first pick. I wouldn't be surprised if it is, but it really does depend on who falls on the board. But this Elijah Moore and Hollywood Brown signing, it signals to the wide receiver room, people I've seen on Eagles social media about this move from outside teams is like, oh, AJ Brown's definitely gone. I think that we won't know more about AJ Brown until after June 1st. Financially, that's just the time that makes the most sense for the Eagles if they were to pull the trigger. But Elijah Moore is an interesting signing because Elijah Moore, he came out of Buffalo last season. He had a very limited role, only had 9 catches in 9 games. But he had 2 seasons in Cleveland where he had over 1,000 yards combined. So I think that he was productive in Cleveland. And so you add some depth, but something people don't realize was that Elijah Moore and AJ Brown were actually college roommates at Ole Miss. And AJ Brown was Elijah Moore's AJ Brown was there the year before. So AJ Brown showed him around, and then they ended up being roommates and ended up being super close friends. And there was a story that AJ Brown spoke about where he was contemplating suicide at Ole Miss. And it was Elijah Moore that helped him get through those mental health struggles. AJ Brown has been very adamant about his mental health. Wow. He's been very vocal about it. So, you kind of add that element to it. Like, you bring someone who's that important to AJ Brown into the building all of a sudden. It just makes me wonder, like, it almost feels like an emotional support teammate for AJ Brown to kind of say, like, hey, he's good enough to stay on this roster. If he competes in training camp and looks awesome, like, there's a chance, you guys can be on the roster at the same time, and you'll have somebody who's close to you that you haven't gotten the chance to, be close to. I think adding that kind of positivity to the locker room, to AJ specifically, I think kind of signals to me and from what I see from Philly's side is like, you're adding his best friend. Like, that's a move to try to keep him here. And I don't know from your perspective, I know you could probably see both sides, but like, from your perspective, knowing about this, because not everyone knew, the relationship between Elijah Moore and AJ Brown, because Elijah Moore's kind of been under the radar because of, who he is as a football player, performance wise. But this is interesting. I don't know if it is, do you think it's something?
I do, yeah. And I think, like, if I had to put money on it or make a guess at anything, like, it would indicate that all things point to AJ Brown staying in Philadelphia. Because, like, based on that, like, if you didn't say the story about how he was influential on his mental health, and you just told me, like, they were buddies in college and so on, well, I'd be like, well, okay, that doesn't really move a needle for me, because it's like, guys bring, or teams bring in guys that have all these ties from college and so on, like, so forth, and it doesn't really have much weight. Yeah, it's cool, but, like, it doesn't necessarily mean much. But then when you get to that, like, emotional level, to the point where, like, it's truly, this person has helped this person in a way that is so different than football, that to me signals something deeper than just, like a roster move in a sense. Like, it almost feels like Philly's way of saying like, AJ, we recognize kind of what you're going through. We kind of recognize the frustrations you have. We want you on this team and we want you to be in like your best headspace. So we're gonna bring in somebody that we know is like, is gonna help you through that and help you be the best version of yourself mentally and physically. So I think it's a solid move. Like it's something that like I think it's underrated and if you factor in kind of that story. So I like it. I think that it indicates AJ would like stay in Philly, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, again, when you look at the wide receiver room now, it's AJ and a bunch of small guys. I mean, you still have Johnny Wilson on the roster, but I don't know. He's going to have to fight for that 53-man spot this year. I mean, Elijah Moore and Hollywood Brown have established themselves as, contributors in the league. So it'll be interesting to see, like, do the Eagles still add in the draft? The Eagles, they have receivers in for visits, so it's like, will that preclude them from taking someone else? So that's something that we'll keep an eye on, because if they end up drafting a receiver, then all of a sudden you're like, well, maybe it actually is AJ Brown being traded. So we'll see. So it'd be great if AJ got to stay here. I get it. Like financially, it would hurt to keep AJ on the books, but when you have a player who can produce like AJ Brown, it's just like you take the L with the money. Like that's Jeffrey Lurie's money, and he wants to win, and so it's like it's something that hasn't stopped him from before.
Sure.
But if it makes the team better by doing so, if we get the package we're wanting, if we're able to, make that package into something great, then yeah, it's easy to say like, oh yeah, that's the right move to trade AJ. But like our window, just like the Niners, is very much in this kind of like 2-year phase where we got the Super Bowl with Jalen and Sirianni and these guys. We had 2 cracks at it, got the one, and we really do have like 2 more years of prime Saquon, AJ. How good is Devontae going to be? Moving forward, Goddard's basically at the end of his being a legit contributor.
Yeah.
So, and then we got a question about Jalen Hurts. Like, how is he going to look in this offense? Like, I love me QB1, and I'm riding with him to the very end. But if he plays like garbage the next 2 years, there's a get out of Jalen Hurts card that they can play and pivot to the future with all these guys and just say, hey, we're going to reset, retool. We have our defense core that we're locking up. So it's like we have our core on defense, and now it's signaling kind of the new wave of the offense. So if Sean Mannion, this is a big ask. If Sean Mannion, can step up and do what Patullo didn't last year and also stay another year and build with Jalen and then move on to be a head coach, maybe we can see the best of Jalen. But, that's a big question mark too. So this team is like in this 1 to 2 year window. So these moves that they've made are kind of the same thing. They're filling in holes, not going into the draft with anything glaring that they need.
Right.
They will take the best player available for what they believe, whether it's in the trenches, because they could very well go D-line to try and get themselves a stud edge rusher now that they didn't land one in free agency. Or they can look for the eventual replacement for Lane Johnson and get them right away, or in the second round too. So it's like the Eagles have positioned. We're very much in the same boat of like who we're going to be looking for, unless the Eagles target a safety, which would be very fun and exciting if they did that. Because there's a few dudes here that if they fell to us in the first, man, I would it'd be tough. So we'll have that conversation. So over the next month here, we're going to be talking about what news we've heard, who comes in for the top 30 visits, who's been reported what, and then we're going to be able to do our own, we'll do our mock draft here together and pick for our teams and kind of see how that ends up. And we can do like our own personal ones on the side and say like, that way we're going to have multiple positions that we're looking at and multiple guys who are going to be in that range. So it'll be very interesting to see who we are. But I think who we end up going for. So for the Eagles, I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, we added a bunch of dudes. I know I'm missing a couple. I feel like I'm missing a name or two in there. But the moves that mattered were filler pieces.
Yeah.
And, we also brought, like, Stone Smart. They're, like, little moves like that. We traded Sidney Brown to the Falcons. That was another move that happened. And we somehow were able to move up in the 6th round and the 4th round when doing that. We moved up like 8 spots in the 4th and like 8 spots in the 6th. So we traded Sidney Brown. And then we re-signed Marcus Epps, and then we signed JT Gray as the special teamers to replace Sidney Brown. There we go. Now the names are coming back to me here. So we made a few of those moves to kind of say, because when we traded Sydney, it was literally just Andrew Makuba on the roster.
Yeah.
Like that was our only safety. So it's like, wait, we need a freaking safety. And Marcus F stepped in admirably last year when Makuba did go out. So having him, there's still a chance he won't make, the 53 if we draft somebody or something like that. But having that kind of, guys who have been here before is important.
So let me ask you the same question you asked me. So you just said like you guys filled a whole bunch of these holes. And you feel like you can go into the draft with kind of an idea of like taking the best available player. But if you had to pinpoint like one area of this roster where you'd feel like there is a hole or potential holes, to be filled soon, meaning guys who like a Goddard who could be on their way out in the next few seasons, like where do you see that biggest hole at?
The luxury picks for me would be safety or tight end. It really would, because of not just Goddard, but like who else we have in the room.
Right.
We don't have any versatility with it. And like if we had a guy like Kenyon Sadiq fall into our lap, I'm taking him. Like I would take him in a heartbeat.
I would too.
And like even if it didn't seem like the right pick, it's just like an opportunity like that usually happens for the Eagles, and that's something that like Howie ends up lucking into some of these guys who either fell for some reason or and I don't think Kenyon Sadiq makes it that far. But we'll see. It really does depend on this draft is going to be interesting because you have teams like the Chiefs, you have teams like the Cowboys with multiple first round picks. Like they can move up, they can ruin this whole thing, and like it'll be very interesting to see with some of the talent that they have going on here. But yeah, it would be safety or tight end.
I like it.
I like the lines. I think that we could get better on the D line, but we can do that in the draft. But I don't think it would be. I don't think we do that round one. I think it would be safety or offensive tackle round one.
I really thought you guys were going to bring back CJ.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought that would have been cool. I thought the timing of it made sense too.
It did.
But he did sign with Buffalo, so good for him. He'll make that defense better. They need more help over there. We'll see. So yeah, we're gonna break down, and we're also gonna we're gonna make our bold predictions, our way too early bold predictions here soon. So it's gonna be a mix of that plus the draft. Like we got football content coming on the way here. But now with March Madness wrapping up, we got to definitely stay on top of that. The Kings season is 10 games away from ending. Finally, we got to that point, right? So then we pivot to the NBA draft, and that's going to be way more fun to talk about the future for next year. So any final thoughts on the pod before we head out here?
Bang Bang Niner game with Light the Beam too?
Yes, sir. Fly Eagles fly. And Light the Beam, good luck on Friday. I can't wait to see the videos post Wisdom Teeth of, you saying Brock Purdy's the best quarterback in the league and all, that's going to be
Hey, they say full honesty comes out when you're under the anesthesia. So, like, I would not be surprised if I say something like that, honestly.
I'm dead. That'd be so funny. So with that being said, guys, we'll close that out today. This is episode 125 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. For all y'all watching on YouTube, the links to our social medias are up above. For all y'all audio listeners out there, the links to descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, follow the show. We appreciate all your guys' love and support as we enter another off season, another draft season. This is going to be fun. March Madness coming to a close. A lot of fun stuff to talk about, guys, so we appreciate you sticking with us and joining us on the pod. With that being said, I'm Marcos Conan-Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet Reds.
All right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week. Peace.